everyone, Adam Kanakin. We're here at ILEETA 2022. With me, the 2022 Instructor of the Year, Todd Fletcher. Todd, thanks for joining me, brother.
I appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Dude, I was so excited. And like I said, I don't know if I can take credit for this, but when the call went out for Instructor of the Year nominations, the first thing I did was I put your name down.
Oh.
And I was like, I don't know if it was my nomination that did it, that was like, I don't know, but I'm assuming there was many people who had the exact same thought, because the stuff that you've been doing is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm so glad, and just the fact that you were recognized for the amount of work that you put in every single day, every single year. The amount of time and effort that you put into ILEETA is phenomenal, but the amount of effort that you put into your students. Man, I saw you teach last year. I got a chance to come down on the range with you, and the way that my favorite part about this entire conference isn't the information. The information's great. What I take away from it is how do other instructors that are the best at their game, how do they teach? I pulled so much out of the way that you teach, and just the joy that you have for what you do, dude. So one, I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate what you do for this industry, what you've given me as an instructor. And yeah, man, I'm just excited to talk about what is it, whatever you want to talk about. You're here teaching this week.
I am.
What's a class you run?
Well, first off, when it comes to the Instructor of the Year, I'm absolutely sharing that award with my wife and business partner, Todd Fletcher. We've got two phenomenal adjunct instructors that we work with on a regular basis, Billy Etheridge and Ron Taylor, and I couldn't do it without them. They make what we do work, and so I appreciate the words. But when it comes to this year at ILEETA, got a lot of stuff going on here, and we did our live fire class on Monday afternoon. It was called Practice What You Suck At.
I love that. I love the concept. Same thing last year. It was fun and games, right? Practicing what you suck at. Let's dive into that. Let's peel that back a little bit. And what are some of those takeaways from that instructors need to understand?
So a lot of times when we go to the range, and whether we're doing in-service training or we're going out to the range to have our own skill, practice our own skill sets, we have a tendency to practice the stuff that we're already good at. And it's important to continue practicing that in order to maintain those skills. But for the most part, we keep doing the same stuff because it makes us feel good, right? We're good at it, so it makes us feel good about ourselves. We avoid all of those things that we kind of suck at because, well, it's an ego hit, right? It's one of those things where you go out to the range and you practice what you already have successfully accomplished as setting a skill set, instead of going out to the range and practicing those things where you struggle. And this really hit home for me a couple years back, where when I would do one-hand shooting, whether it was with my strong hand or my support hand, it really didn't matter. I wasn't real happy with the results, right? I felt like I was making great progress with two hands on the gun, and it didn't matter whether it was a handgun, a shotgun, a rifle. Everything was kind of coming together real well. But anytime that I got a handgun and I started doing one-hand shooting, I kind of sucked. I wasn't happy with my performance, and I wasn't willing to accept suck as skill level, right? I wasn't willing to. Let me put it this way. In a fight for your life, do you want to be lucky? Do you want to be good? Or do you want to be both? Right? Well, one of those things we control, right? We can control our own skill level. So we can control whether we're good or not. We can kind of make some of our own luck by preparing ahead of time and working on those things. And so I decided, you know what? I need to get better at one-hand shooting, because I want to be good and lucky, not just suck in a fight for my life. And I got to tell you, if you're in a fight for your life and you're down to fighting with one hand, you need everything going your way at that point, because it hasn't up to then.
You know what? It's funny. I was at SHOT Show earlier this year, and I was doing some training with Virtua. They had their simulator set up, and we're trialing out some other technologies and stuff like that. One of them basically it contracts your arms so that you can't use it. And so what we did was we did an active shooter scenario. So I had a long gun and a sidearm. And I'm going through, and I started with the long gun, and then everything kicks off, and it simulated that I got shot in the arm, so my arm locked up and I couldn't use it on my right side. I'm a right-handed shooter. Now all of a sudden, I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I can't index my rifle correctly. I could probably do it right-handed. Never even done it before on my left. So I take it, drop it down, drop to a knee. I have to draw from my my opposite side, draw out, and go through the rest of the scenario one-handed, left-handed. And you're sitting there, and I was able to complete it. But I in the back of my mind, I was like, if this was like a real thing, I'm like, I get it. The amount of stress that I got in the scenario, in a simulator, was high enough. Let alone in a real gunfight, when your life's on the line or other people's lives are on the line. It's like, I wasn't happy with my performance in the simulator. Yeah. I could imagine how unhappy I'd be with my performance in a real life situation.
And the simulator does a pretty good job of giving you stress, but it's not life-threatening stress, right? And the time to work on those skills, to develop that skill set, to improve your knowledge, skills, and ability is in training. It's not in the middle of a gunfight, right? You're not going to get better in the middle of a gunfight. You have to work on that ahead of time. And so if we practice what we suck at, if we practice those support hand only draws from the holster, those support hand only reloads, shooting strong hand only, support hand only, shooting a shotgun, strong hand only, support hand only, shooting our patrol rifle, strong hand only, support hand only, and doing all of those weapon manipulation things that we need to do in order to prevail in a life-threatening stress type situation, that skill needs to be developed ahead of time, right? You're not going to just magically develop a better game plan under life-threatening stress. And quite frankly, the time to feel that kind of sense of failure is in training, right? Because that's where you can experiment with different angles, different techniques, different body movements, where you can change your elbow position, just this much to see does that help, does that hinder, right? That's the time to experiment. That's the time to improve your skill levels in training. We talk about, and I don't really like the term failure, but I like the term, experimental. When you're training, you can experiment with things, find out whether it works or not. That's the time to do it, right? Find out what your limits are. What are you capable of? What is your gear doing to you, right? Are you wearing a outer vest carrier and your gear is set up in a certain way that now hinders your ability to draw from a holster with your support side hand, or is it actually helping you to become more effective? So the time to find that stuff out is in training. If we practice what we suck at, we'll find those things out ahead of time instead of in a fight for our life.
Man, absolutely. And I just want to touch on one thing, because I know you and I have had this conversation before. It's the verbiage. It's one thing I always pick up when you're teaching, and you always say strong hand, support hand.
I understand, words have meaning, and people are going to say, well, they call it my weak hand, and so I can't do anything with it. I understand that philosophy or that concept. I really do. I call it support hand because, it's generally there to support what we do. When you come to our instructor classes, we call it something else for instructors. I'm not going to give that away, but it's something we don't say in front of our students. But as instructors, we got to remember when our students have the gun on their support side, there are certain things instructors got to be paying attention to. So we use more colorful language when it comes to the support side of my body. But it's one of those things where whether you call it strong hand, support hand, I've heard reactionary hand, I've heard all sorts of different descriptions. I don't really get all wrapped around the axle on that. I call it my support hand because it basically doesn't do all the stuff that my right hand, in my case, does. If I don't know, calling it support hand or weak hand, it's one of those things where, one of the analogies we use is if you don't think that it's your support hand or weak hand, tonight, instead of brushing your teeth with your dominant hand, use your non-dominant hand to brush your teeth and tell me how that works out for you. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we need to go out to the range and we need to practice with that non-dominant side or that support hand side, because things just don't work as well for us as our dominant side. Trigger fingers do weird things, muzzles go in funny directions. We just don't have the level of dexterity that we have with our dominant hand.
Well, that's something I learned last year on the range, because we did the drill where you basically walk back in a line and you're shooting one-handed on both sides or whatever. That's what I learned was the position that I shot with my right hand was very similar to if I have two, but on my left, I don't know what it was, I was a lot more canted off to the side and my elbow was a lot farther in, and it was just because of the way that my eye dominance work and the way I indexed. It was like two completely different shooting styles, one hand to the other. And it's just like, it was weird to see that, and then, but understanding that that's okay. Everybody shoots things differently. It's about how proficient are you in that skill set.
Yeah, and if you don't practice it, you're not going to gain proficiency, right? And everybody has little quirks that work for them, or little body positions that work for them. When I shoot one-handed, I have a tendency to drop my elbow down a little bit more towards the ground, in not quite this manner, but fairly close, as opposed to keeping my gun up like I would normally keep it up. But Crystal, who's a very good shooter, she basically, shooting one-handed is just taking one hand off the gun. Nothing changes for her, right? She is a very talented shooter, which helps, but it doesn't work for me.
Right.
But that's one of the great things about working with another instructor that is really talented is just because something doesn't work for me doesn't mean it's not going to work for one of our students, right? So whether you copy me, copy Crystal, something in between, you got to find what works for your shooters, right? Because it's not about you as the instructor. It's not about making clones of Todd or clones of Crystal. It's about finding solutions for your shooters.
So here's a question that I have for you.
Okay.
We're here teaching instructors.
Yeah.
How do you get instructors to identify what their students are lacking? Because I think that's right. It's great to say, like, as a shooter, I can identify what I'm not good at. Some people can be introspective. Mm-hmm. I can say, I understand that I suck at this. Some people are a little bit more oblivious, and they're just like, if they're not conscious thinking about it, they don't care.
Yeah.
As an instructor, how do you start teaching instructors to draw that out of their students on the range?
It starts with one of our leadership principles: check your ego. Right? It's not about the instructor. It's about the shooter, about your student. It is finding a solution for them. You're not trying to make clones. Like I said before, what you're trying to do is you're trying to develop the skill set of that shooter so that they can prevail in a gunfight. They can go home to their families. So you gotta check your ego, right? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is an empathetic instructor can put themselves in the position of that shooter and sometimes even feel what that shooter's feeling, even without them understanding it. And I don't mean feelings from an emotional standpoint. I mean, you can put yourself in their position and feel what their body's doing. And you can kind of read what's going on with the shooter. And I think it takes experience, but it starts with being able to empathize with your shooter. Once you can kind of see where they're starting from, then, and really only then, can you step forward and really help them out, because not every shooter is going to have the same issues, right? They're not going to respond to the same coaching, instructing, training, or mentoring, right? So it really does take somebody to make that connection with that student in order to find a solution that works for them.
I love that, dude. I think that's so awesome. I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Why ILEETA? You've been a part of ILEETA for a long time. You keep coming back year after year. Why this conference? Why this organization?
So why ILEETA kind of goes back to my first experience at ILEETA. One of the mentors in my career is a guy named Dennis Carroll, and he's an ILEETA advisory board member. And back in 2007, 2008, somewhere around in there, he asked me, he goes, "Why aren't you going to ILEETA?" And I said, "I don't even know what ILEETA is." And he says, "You need to know about ILEETA." And so we talked about ILEETA. He actually encouraged me to apply for a scholarship. And so I applied for the scholarship. I had no expectation of receiving a scholarship. Really didn't have a whole lot of department support to go to ILEETA ever in my career. I think it was because they just didn't know, right? And so I applied for that scholarship. I got awarded a scholarship to go to ILEETA when it was in Wheeling, Illinois. And I went to my first ILEETA conference and was amazed and overwhelmed by the people that were attending, by the staff, by the instructors, by the people taking classes, by the ILEETA Expo, the vendors and the vendor support. It was an amazing event. And I went home absolutely exhausted. I mean, I was burnt out. It took me a couple of weeks really to recover from. But at the same time, it was like I had just gotten a new set of batteries, right? It energized me for the next year. And one of the things I discovered at that first ILEETA conference that I attended, and I rediscover every single year, is the amazing people that attend ILEETA. It is a group of trainers that are true outliers in the training industry. You will never find a group that is more driven to improve training, to improve content, delivery, and the skill level of their students. You'll never find a greater number of people than you will find here at ILEETA. It's not just, we do it this way because it's the way we've always done it, right? This is a group of training outliers that are looking for the next best way. And I really love the idea of pushing the envelope and making our people better, because frankly, we owe it to our people. More importantly, we owe it to the people that we train. We owe it to our students' families who are left at home to make sure that they're better, right? Because you may have chosen this job, you may have chosen this career, you may choose to suck. I'm going to do everything I can to make you better, even if you don't want to, because I know that your spouse, your kids, your mom and dad, they don't want you to suck. They want you better.
Right.
So this is a group that understands that concept.
I love that, dude.
So.
I love it. Brother, it's been a pleasure.
All right.
Every year. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, dude. That's it. We're getting good at this, dude.